Hello, welcome to Awaken the Age of Revealing. This is Doug Michael. The topic for today is realistic spirituality. And you know, ladies and gentlemen, on the heels of my latest presentations, I realize that some of my subscribers and listeners may come away with the impression that since these discussions have been focused on conscious advancement, that I've fallen into the well of mystical fantasies. I want to assure my listeners that I am in no way peddling a different form of mystical escapism by presenting this information. We have enough of that going on around out there as it is. When we look around us, we have to realistically acknowledge the fact that the world we live in is in a very chaotic state. Although those who stay wrapped in their blanket of totally selfish ego focus immerse themselves in stupid superficial activities like hanging out their personal laundry for all the world to see in forums like Facebook and other social networking sites, or have a cell phone glued to their ear all hours of the day and night, thinking people have nothing better to do than listen to their own ego bullshit while they yak their heads off, more consciously aware human beings can see the ugly world around us and the direction it's headed. That is, unless they are completely asleep. The major problem I see in the modern spiritual movement is the willful avoidance of these situations. I see a blindness in the followers of the New Age movement that is perfectly exemplified in this passage from Embracing the Rainbow. Much of the valuable information disseminated through other receivers has become an addiction for fantasizing with little or no application in practical living experience. The focus has been towards survival of the physical body so that the same ideals and lifestyle could be maintained until individuals could ascend rather than transcend. The focus must be more holistic and include survival for service aimed at lifting the yoke of darkness and descending vibratory experience from humanity and the planet, rather than be focused on individual escape from the morass of a destructive situation. In other words, there must be participation in a solution rather than using the information to abandon the ship. In order to be a spiritual realist, we can't sit back and let these escapist notions just emphasized point the direction for human advancement. None of us who may consider ourselves part of the, quote, ground crew who volunteered to work to alter the present paradigm on this planet came here to whine about our situation after we came in and try to seek escape. We all came here to do a dirty job as humans, to clean up and alter the direction of humanity away from the control paradigm of the consortium. No one on the ground crew is getting a free ride or a free ticket out of this game simply because they are dissatisfied and seek an escape. We came in to ride this bucking bronco, and until you realize and accept that, you are not an effective member of the ground crew, no matter what you may think. As the global situation worsens, no matter where you are in the world, we are all going to be surrounded with sometimes chaotic situations as the ego-driven people of the world start feeding on each other with their hatreds, drawing each other deeper and deeper into the cognitive quagmire. We are very liable to see bloodshed and mayhem as these situations develop. We can already see the pot simmering to a boil with the Islamic invasion of Europe and European Christians psychologically gearing for what is very liable to turn into another religious conflict as their emotions inflame. As the global elite push harder to bring situations like this to a head, ego-driven people are going to become more reactive as they feel that their personal turf is being invaded or threatened. Many of these more radical egos in the U.S. are already talking about another civil war, and as the friction heats up, such things are not an impossibility. Farrakhan, the leader of the Nation of Islam, recently called for a race war, so we would be totally ignorant to avoid these signs of the times for large-scale unrest. What I want to emphasize to my listeners is that I am not being unrealistic in teaching about advancing our consciousness and thinking that by doing so, we are somehow going to be preserved from the chaos around us. That is pure escapist thinking, and it has no grounding in realistic spirituality. As one moves into a higher state of cognitive awareness and their energy field alters, we find that spiritual detachment I talked about before. Spiritual detachment does not mean that you disconnect from the world around you, thinking that by gaining detachment it brings some form of release from our ground crew responsibilities and interfacing with the world in which we live. Detachment brings one a psychological and an emotional distance from the lower vibrational ego energies and the emotional upheavals that presently control that type of consciousness. What I want my listeners to understand is that by focusing on consciousness, that I am by no means abandoning my previous videos about noticing what's going on in the world. I'm not suddenly taking a hard turn into woo-woo land. I've been teaching conscious awareness every step of the way, and awareness of the shithole energetic environment is part of one's cognitive spiritual process. One is coupled with the other. Advancing one's own consciousness is not mutually exclusive from being aware of the ugly world situation that surrounds us. I am not seeking to be an alarmist, but one only needs to read the financial news any day of the week to see how the global financial markets are facing crisis in one form or another, and the fact that they are reporting it to the public at all in such volume is an indicator that all things are not well in that arena. When we have crazy shits ruling countries like North Korea, working with nuclear weapons delivery systems, we have to at least consider the possibility that Kim Jong-un might actually launch some kind of EMP attack that could wipe out the entire energy grid of the U.S. If the global financial system collapses and money becomes worthless, what are you prepared for? If we see some kind of nuclear exchange through EMP blasts and countries lose the power grid, then what? I'm not saying that either of these events is a definitive eventuality, but in this crazy world, neither one is impossible. So in order to be realistically oriented spiritual individuals, we have to recognize these problems and figure out what we can do in the face of the potential mayhem that would result if either one of these events occurred. Anyone who watches conspiracy videos can detect a serious note of panic in a lot of those presentations. This feeling of panic is the panic of an ego about to have its reality challenged or outright destroyed. I can't say what the ultimate catalyst will be that brings all this ugliness and hatred to a head, but we would be foolish to think that some spark is not going to ignite this tinderbox of hatred sooner or later. To be realistically spiritual, we have to recognize these things and do what we can to prepare for what lies ahead. I fully endorse some common sense prepping in the eventuality of food or water disruption. Now, by saying this, I'm not remotely suggesting that people go into the bunker mentality type of prepping, for that is the reaction of an ego personality operating from fear and a sense of paranoia. This video is going to offer some brief points for my listeners to consider, and it is not going to be exhaustive in the points made, because in all honesty, there is a lot more to this than can be squeezed into even an hour-long presentation or a 5-hour-long presentation. In order to be spiritual realists, we have to see all of this, but we also have to understand the aspects of spirit and energy as they apply to these situations. Although the law of attraction has been highly abused through books like The Secret, the law of attraction is energetic in nature. It is not about manifesting material goods, finding your true love, or getting that great job like that book peddles to the public. Like energies attract like energies. We don't see a lot of evidence of this in the world so much because everyone is basically operating on the same low vibrational frequency, and they are seeking material manifestations through energetic misdirection. Within the new paradigm, which I want to emphasize already exists as an energetic framework, a new frequency is present that those who are genuinely spiritually inclined and not just doctrinal hangers-on will find for themselves. And I realize that many of my listeners may have not yet experienced how these higher vibrational energies can work to sort of insulate us from the ugly frequencies around us. But from personal experience, I could tell you that such concepts are not a fallacy, nor are they some kind of mystical nonsense. These concepts, the New Age gets their hands on it, and like everything else, twist it around. Take actual universal truth and pepper it with a whole bunch of horseshit and nonsense to misdirect people. And that's just another concept the New Age has done. The idea of the law of attraction, it's been corrupted and twisted. As each one of us moves into the energy matrix of the new paradigm and is able to develop spiritual detachment, we're going to find that a lot of the shit we had to deal with from ego-driven people in our lives starts to fade away as one's own vibration increases. Lower vibrational people no longer feel any kind of energetic harmony with someone who is elevating their frequency. So these people just kind of fade out of our lives and go find some other low vibrational individual to focus their attention on. I've seen this in my life through the years over and over again. This is how the law of attraction works in actuality. Energy brings like energy to itself and repulses those energies that disagree with this energy signature. Again, from Embracing the Rainbow, humanity can change this long-standing experience, break the chain, and return to the evolving citizenship of the galaxy universe by choosing responsibility and applying the laws in their daily experience, both individually and as a group. Because of the presence of polarity, when those are drawn together as a group, this also repels those who choose otherwise, and a great division is made. The application of the laws creates a cooperative situation that allows for protection from the fear of the actions of the other groups in most surprising ways. The vibration increases rapidly, and protective means are most creative indeed. The more people who can come to terms with the idea of vibrational separation, the more we can find a collective energetic barrier that protects us from the continual bombardment of fear generated from these negative energies. But just because the ground crew can create this type of energetic protection, it will not remove us from seeing that shit happening in the world around us as the negativity escalates. The get-out-of-jail-free escapist mentality of the New Age belief systems is not what is going to help you weather the difficult storms ahead. In order to prepare yourself for whatever eventuality may come about, your greatest weapon is going to be your spiritual and psychological strength to deal with the shit when it happens. In order to emphasize this point about cognitive preparedness, I ask you to just observe the silliness of the people around you, walking around in blissful ignorance with their faces glued to their TV sets or doing all their social networking, continually yakking on the cell phone, and ego posturing and public displays galore. When you observe these things and how blissfully ignorant these people are of what is happening around them, just how do you think they are going to react when the world as they know it, meaning their fictional world of ego-oriented ignorance and self-focused entertainment, comes to an end? How many of these people are going to be psychologically prepared for such an eventuality? And if they're not prepared, just try to imagine the panic that will ensue when these people finally realize the gravity of their situation. How many of them do you expect not to crater mentally when reality comes up and bitch slaps them in the face? I mean, think about it, ladies and gentlemen. I know in some of my old stuff, you've heard me mention Black Friday, which for my listeners that may not be American, Black Friday is the biggest shopping day of the year, where these merchants have all kinds of, low prices, and the people will wait in the cold, freezing weather for hours and hours to get in and get a bargain good. Now, it happens every year in various locations. People get stomped to death, or a person will stab another person or beat another person to get a bargain video game system or a cell phone or some fucking useless trinket. Now, what do you think those animals will do when there's no food on the grocery store shelves? I'll tell you, they will burn entire cities to the ground. We see all these panic-driven dramatic videos on YouTube, perhaps a large number produced by the controllers themselves, in order to sow panic in the minds of ego-oriented people about the government instituting martial law with the whole, they're going to come get your mentality. Now, granted, many people following the conspiracy videos have been able to put two and two together to understand why governments seem to be gearing up for martial law, but the vast majority will never see it coming. They don't realize that the governments know something is coming, or they wouldn't be gearing up for it to begin with. That fact alone should serve as a beacon to warn people that something is coming. A government can't generally institute martial law without reason, yet some of these video producers leave people with the impression that a government can just declare martial law on a whim. Even when they pulled in Boston, when they pulled that test run looking for the bombers, that was used as a reason. And the entire fiasco was a test run. If shit goes south for whatever reason, and you look at the blissful idiots that surround us, consider what they are liable to do when it finally does go wrong. Then, from a realistic standpoint, you can finally understand why martial law will be a necessity. It won't necessarily be because the government doesn't have a hidden agenda. Of course they do. But it will be because of how these ill-informed, ego-driven fools will react in the face of a dire situation. All we have to do is look at the bullshit that happened after Hurricane Katrina or the crap in Ferguson to get an idea how badly the public is going to react. And those were just localized events. What happens when it is a nationwide or global in scope? Now, I am not sowing panic by bringing these things to light. I am sowing awareness, as I have sought to do with every video that I produce. And I'm also illustrating how being spiritual in no way removes us from facing the shit on a realistic basis. To be able to ride through whatever storm may come our way is going to require a strength of spirit that most of these people don't possess. How many of them are liable to go mad within just a few days when their perceptual reality crumbles? How many are going to eat a bullet rather than face their destroyed reality? If things go really bad, how many of them are going to die in food riots, scrambling for a box of sea rations or whatever, or kill each other for a fucking loaf of bread? They'll kill each other for a fucking PlayStation or a fucking toaster that's on sale. To be spiritually cognizant means to be mentally and spiritually armed to realize that one day we may have to walk over dead bodies to cross a street. Do you have the spiritual strength and psychological detachment to be able to do that if you are confronted with such a scenario? If you can understand the importance of these questions, particularly if you count yourself one of the ground crew, then you can understand realistic spirituality and why escapist spirituality will not remotely prepare you for what seems to be coming our way in one form or another. Again, as embracing the rainbow informs us, it must be emphasized here that the ground crew is included in this drama. Volunteering to help also carries with it the responsibility of becoming part of the destiny of the planetary consciousness. There will be no rescue. Each will rise or fall within that destiny. Then this fuels the necessary commitment and focus of energy in helping humanity to accomplish this last-ditch effort to come into vibratory alignment. This passage tells us that whatever ego drama happens on this planet, we are going to have to walk through that storm. To think that we're going to be somehow spiritually immune from dealing with certain unpleasant scenarios as this system falls apart is only another form of denial. Now, this doesn't mean that the energies of the new paradigm can't serve to insulate us energetically from a lot of the fear and panic that will result, but we're not going to be spared some of the physical horrors that surround us. In order to survive these things, we have to be both spiritually aware of what is happening and why. We also have to be mentally geared through our spiritual detachment to realize that no matter how ugly these things get, it is a necessary element of bringing about this change. There is no birthing without blood, and we all have to gain the emotional detachment from these ugly circumstances to realize that the people in that paradigm are literally bringing it on themselves from an energetic and cognitive standpoint. Stupidity and ignorance have a price, and it is not always a pretty outcome when they meet. When we can see this and start to gear our psyche and spirit into accepting these ugly but realistic facts, then we find that the information in those paradigm books gives us greater insight into what to anticipate without going into minute detail. It is through your individual conscious advancement that you will learn detachment and make wise decisions to ensure your safety as much as possible. This means that you don't get emotionally riled up and run out in some kind of revolutionary frenzy and subject yourself to needless harm. As the new paradigm books clearly state, we didn't embark on this mission as ground crew to become cannon fodder. I will also say that if you can be armed because there is no law against self-defense, then be prepared. Again, not in a paranoid kind of way, just in a realistic way. Now, ideally, none of us wants to be in that situation at all. But if it comes to a kill or be killed scenario, in order to survive an attack, then you better be ready to pull the trigger to save yourself or your family, your children, your loved ones. Love and light ain't worth a shit in a life and death situation. I'm going to repeat that. Let it sink in, okay? Love and light ain't worth a shit in a life and death situation. Once again, this is realistic. It may not be pretty, but it's goddamn real. I ask my listeners to ponder these points and encourage them to not fall into a panic mode over this. I encourage you to make reasonable preparations in case of any emergency. Hell, even FEMA recommends trying to put at least 3 months' worth of supplies back in case of emergency or disaster. I'm talking about common sense prepping, not preparing for the apocalypse. During this time of disruption, we may be faced with temporary food shortages, power disruptions, water system outages, on occasion, or any number of different things. There's a huge number of videos on YouTube about prepping where even the novice prepper can learn a lot of storing ideas for canned and dry goods, as well as other smart supplies for emergency preparations. It goes beyond the scope of this video to explain it all, but the information's out there. It's up to those interested to do the research and try and prepare accordingly. Just use the search prepper on YouTube and you'll be surprised at the wealth of valid and useful information available to the public on that matter. As we sit on the edge of the new paradigm with the energy taking shape while the old system gears up to feed on itself, I want to impart to my listeners what I think is a sound piece of wisdom that will guide us through all this turmoil and place us in that position to make a better world for humanity and do what we came here to do. Our job is to stay out of the way of the bullets as much as possible until the dust settles from all this turmoil, as the ego-feeding frenzy reaches its climax and eventually dies down. Once the dust settles, people are going to be more willing to listen to an alternative way of living, standing dazed and wondering just what the fuck happened to their reality. It is the ground crew, those of my listeners who know in their gut that they are part of the solution, who will be the teachers and guides to show humanity the new paradigm once they have exhausted themselves with war and conflict and are willing to listen. You'll never be able to fulfill that part of your mission objective if you run off and get yourself shot playing cowboy with all the other idiots. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to open your mind and search for truth. Till next time, walk in peace.